Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's guests from MLB.com, Chad Evans and Adam Ritter.
Hi, good evening. My name is Adam Ritter, and this is my colleague Chad Evans, and we're from MLB Advanced Media, and we're really pleased to be here with you all today. Today's a historic event for all of us, especially those of us who have published apps in the App Store, and just about anybody who's ever downloaded an app out of the App Store. Today is the 5th anniversary of the Apple App Store, and we couldn't be pleased. We were one of the first apps in the store when there was just 500, and here we are on the 5th anniversary with an ecosystem that we're really pleased to be a part of. What we would like to do with you is just give you a brief background on MLB Advanced Media. We're part of Major League Baseball, and really walk you through the evolution of how we got from our early beginnings in the early days of 2000 to where we are today. MLB.com was founded in 2000 by the commissioner of Major League Baseball when he and the 30 club owners voted unanimously to vest all of their interactive media rights in a separate, standalone organization, an independent tech company whose whole being was to invest in solutions to bring the best-in-breed technology to the fans of baseball. So pretty easy thing to achieve, right?
Yeah, and we were actually the first sports league to take that approach. Prior to that, you may remember, almost every team had an independently run and operated site, which, aside from being incredibly inefficient, led to a pretty wide disparity in the quality you would get. So the same market effects you might see in sports would be distributed to their technology. So you'd have to recreate every scoreboard, all that work time and again. So by centralizing it, we could really create a more uniform quality experience for all the teams.
And in addition to providing all the technology to Major League Baseball to bring the action from the field to fans, or whether on desktop computers or mobile devices, we also support the 30 clubs with ticketing solutions, shop, sponsorship opportunities, as well as licensing.
So if you remember back to late 90s, early 2000, it was the height of the first .com boom, and cities all across America were trying to take advantage of the hype and excitement around Silicon Valley. So you started seeing in Texas, you had the Silicon Prairie, there were Silicon Harbors, Silicon Beaches. In New York, we had Silicon Alley, which was in the Flatiron District and Chelsea area. And so when the league was looking for a location to start its fledgling technology company, they decided to move downtown from the sort of official league offices uptown on Park Avenue, and we moved into our outpost in Chelsea Market in the Meatpacking District. The Meatpacking District at the time was what we like to call an up-and-coming neighborhood, which really meant that it was kind of sketchy. It actually still smelled like meat at the time. And we were in Chelsea Market, which was the site of a historic Nabisco cookie factory. So my first year in the company, I actually sat at a desk that was in an oven where they used to bake Oreo cookies.
So fast forward to 2001, which was really the launch year, April of that year, of MLB.com, which, if you think about it, was a site for the league, as you see there, but also 30 individual club sites. And if you're all familiar with baseball, the very first pitch of the very first game it's a ceremony, throwing out the first pitch. And we decided to have a similar ceremony in our office. So 2 lucky folks got to throw and catch the first ball, and we learned something that day, that if you drop the ball, that's a bad thing, an omen. So finally, they threw the first pitch in the real games, and all the traffic started coming to the sites, and everything crashed.
Fortunately, there was no social media yet, because we would have been absolutely crushed on Twitter for all the sites going down. But we did manage to recover, and over the course of that year, we launched a lot of the foundational technology that you still see today, from live audio broadcast to independent press coverage, live game stats, a lot of the features that are still with us today. And we learned a really important lesson, which was that we are a live site. We get huge peak volumes of traffic when games are live, and I don't really think they were expecting that with the first launch of the site. So taking that live game experience really became sort of a core mantra of what MLB.com is all about. Another big opportunity in 2001 was, remember, it was Ichiro's first year in the league, and he was electric. He was like a rock star for baseball. He was the first Japanese-born, everyday position player, and the excitement was huge. There were huge press crowds following him around, and we thought, what better opportunity to take advantage of this new internet technology than to broadcast all of the Mariners games live in Japanese. Launched the product and did not go any way as we expected it. It turned out there was very limited interest in listening to poor quality audio at 4 a.m. in the morning in Japan with a Netscape plugin that you probably couldn't figure out how to install. But we sort of moved on and really took it to heart that we still believed in internet streaming, and we just didn't have great product market fit, as you were, for this product.
So early on, the CEO of our company, Bob Bowman, believed that live streaming was the future. It was the future of streaming live content online. And in August of 2002, we actually took the step of streaming live baseball games to fans on desktop computers, and whether it be Macs or PCs. And it was an incredible experience, as you might imagine, streaming at a 29 kilobit stream through a dial-up modem. It was like watching a slideshow. But we actually had 30,000 people watch. But
yeah, the press was lackluster, to say the least. Here are some of the quotes. So really, nobody believed that anyone would actually want to watch live games on a computer. It just was not something anyone expected to do. They never thought the quality would get there. And for anyone who's ever worked at a startup, it's a message you often hear a lot. No one believed in my product. And we actually experienced that very same thing here, which is that live streaming wasn't really real. It just wasn't ever going to get where it needed to get.
So we were actually launched later that season, or the following season, a full slate of games online. And that was the birth of what we now know as MLB.TV, which is watching live out-of-market games, fans. So if you're a Yankee fan and you're living on the West Coast, you can enjoy every live game today on virtually any platform.
Yep, and when that product launched, we realized we needed to make a really big infrastructure investment, really to address some of the quality issues. So we wired up all the ballparks with direct fiber access from the parks to our office in New York, bringing in live HD source directly from the park, which allowed us, one, to improve the quality, but also to cut down on the latency of the broadcast streams coming from the games to get it out to your computer.
So 2005 was really the birth of mobile for baseball from MLB.com. And the opportunity was to take all these terrific features that have been offered online, all the streaming, the live audio, the live video, the ticket purchase flows. But we looked around and we said, you know what, the networks aren't there yet, and certainly the devices in 2005, we were all carrying flip phones and candy bars with 12 buttons on them. They weren't there either. But what we did see was services were starting to be developed, things like mobile web. Phones had browsers in them, very rudimentary browsers. Text messaging, we were all sending and receiving text messages back in 2005, and we had a product where you could deliver team alerts to fans. And then lastly, apps, not apps as we know them today, but apps that were developed on platforms like Brew and J2ME, all gave us the opportunity to start experimenting with delivering content to fans.
Right. And it was really huge for us, a giant advantage to get into mobile so early. And being in 2005, we really had the opportunity to rethink everything we were doing on MLB.com for the mobile context. And that meant users who were on the go, users who were on devices with really limited broadband capability. At the time, we were still on an edge network. And small screens and new inputs like D-pads and access keys. So we really started to change the entire way MLB.com operated to think about how to best serve content to users in a mobile environment. And the mobile environment was really difficult. If you think back to your phone in 2005, you probably had a flip phone, what we call a feature phone from one of the carriers. And the entire mobile experience, particularly browsing, was very gated by the carrier. So you couldn't just open up your phone and go to a browser and search for something or type in a URL. You had to go through what we called the carrier decks. And the carrier decks were these walled gardens, much like AOL in its heyday. And we really had to work closely with the carriers to get our content, because if you weren't featured on one of the decks, no one was going to see your site, which also meant we were subject to a lot of rules and restrictions from the carriers about the way our content had to look and behave. They gave us detailed style guides and made us link back to their carrier decks from every page on our site, which means we had to detect every carrier your phone was on just so we could serve links back to their pages.
Right. So in addition to the business relationships with the 4 major carriers to get our site available on their decks, SMS had its own shortcomings. Short codes were expensive. You have to lease them even to today. You have to go to the individual carriers and get them to permission you to allow your traffic over their networks. And apps in those early days were extremely cumbersome. In addition to building the apps and getting the apps certified, all which had great expense, the carriers took 50% of the revenue.
Yeah, and that was also our real first introduction into the term you hear a lot these days, which is device fragmentation, particularly with developing apps. When we created an app for Brew, we had to submit it to the carrier on 30 different specific devices where they did complete end-to-end testing of every feature in the app, submitted us copious feedback about what was right, what was wrong. We spent a ton of time developing for different media codecs. In the browser world, we had completely different levels of support for HTML, the different screen sizes. It was a ton of development time. Our most popular devices back then were actually Blackberries and those old Motorola Razr phones. Remember when Motorola was really big into 4-letter razors and sliders and all those devices. So we were spending a huge percentage of our development time simply handling cross-device issues like screen size, HTML support. Those Blackberries came with their tables and style sheets turned off, and people were just getting a pretty lousy experience.
Fast forward to 2007, and the iPhone is released, and it was revolutionary, right? It had a touch screen, it didn't have a keypad. It also could do things like stream live video, or stream video clips, rather. And really what it spelled the end was, it spelled the end of the carrier decks, the monopoly. It allowed anybody to deliver content directly to fans.
Yeah. The other big innovation of the iPhone that made a huge deal to us was that it was the first phone that made it super easy to get Wi-Fi connectivity. And for the first time, you could really see what it was like to have a broadband experience on a really capable mobile device. And that really opened our eyes, particularly to the possibilities of what could we do with live video, or any kind of video really, on a mobile device.
Right. So the off-season going into 2008, we took the opportunity to leverage the iPhone, and we saw that our fans had these phones. They were using these phones, and the ability to deliver video to the phones was something that was very tantalizing for us. So we launched a product in the off-season in preparation for opening day called Video Alerts. Essentially, we sent fans a text message with an embedded URL that they could click on and watch video. Part of that was unheard of. You couldn't do that in the world that we lived in prior with feature phones. Moving into 2008, the SDK from Apple was released. That was March of 2008.
Yeah, and the SDK was another huge game changer for us. Really, there was so much excitement in the developer community about it. If you remember, the first iPhone did not have apps. And in fact, the encouragement was to build web apps. But there was a huge outpouring of the developer community saying, we want to really tap into the potential of this device. Let us build native apps. And our development team was no different. They were incredibly excited about this. Because if you remember at the time, the App Store wasn't the App Store with nearly 1 billion apps and huge numbers of downloads. We really had to decide, is this a place where we want to be committing our resources to build apps, or should we focus on web? But it was really because our development team was just so incredibly passionate about creating for this platform that we decided that we would embrace it. And the move really paid off. We got an app ready in time for Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference that June, and we actually got to send 2 of our developers to present on stage at the keynote to show what baseball apps would look like on an iPhone.
And in July that year, actually, this is the anniversary, the App Store launched. And that first day, we were extremely, extremely happy and surprised. We priced AppBat that first season at $4.99, and the first day we sold 5,000 apps. Our fans spoke with their pocketbooks and wallets and their enthusiasm.
Yep, and really, if you go back, here's some screens of the original iPhone app. It was actually based on Apple's Stocks app. It was incredibly simple. It only offered scores and video highlights. But what we learned was that with an incredibly easy-to-use, great customer experience, we could take content that we were pretty much giving away on the web, and we could sell it, and fans were really delighted. They loved the experience, and they just immediately, reviews came in asking for more and more features.
So 2009 was a pivotal season. At the end of 2008, AppBat was on the store. We constantly updated the app. We actually incorporated game day at the end of that season, but we launched the following year in 2009 with AppBat 2009. The big feature was live streaming audio. Fans for the first time could listen to live games, choose home and away broadcasts.
Right. During that off season as well, we spent a lot of investment time working on a technology called HTTP live streaming. And what that was an adaptive bitrate streaming technology, meaning that as your bandwidth fluctuated, the streams would automatically adapt and drop or raise quality to fill your available bandwidth. And that was a big deal for the mobile environment, where as you dropped from Edge or switched to a 3G network or even up to Wi-Fi, the streams could automatically adapt and give you the best possible experience for your current device. So we had spent the whole offseason working on that, which became incredibly important.
Right, and then following WWDC that year when Apple unveiled the iOS that supported live streaming, we actually were the first sports league to deliver live games on the iPhone. Later that summer, we opened up the iPhone to all of our MLB.TV subscribers on at-bat, where they could log in and see the same experience that they could see previously only on their desktop computers for the first time on a mobile device.
And Apple introduced one other big feature at that keynote event, which was the first time doing in-app purchase. And we sort of had this mandate from our CEO, which is anytime Apple announces something really cool, we really need to be the first sports league to be on top of it and release it. So that same year, we actually sold through in-app purchase single games during the pennant races. So you could buy and log in and watch one game for 99 cents. And surprisingly, no one was interested. We had huge take-up on our streaming subscription package, but there was really limited interest in going in and buying 99-cent games, which was pretty surprising to us.
In 2009, our CEO went on CNBC and made a prediction. That prediction came true. In 2012, wireless page views had surpassed wired page views, and it was historic, and he was right, and it's just gone up from there. 2010, another historic moment, the iPad arrives.
Yeah, the iPad was another huge opportunity for us. Apple invited us to speak at their iPad launch keynote. There I am. I think I'm actually wearing the same shirt. And it was really great to be a part of that because we really got to say, how can we make at-bat even better for the iPad? We can't just take our existing iPhone app and make it bigger. We really need to rethink the entire experience to take advantage of the great screen on that device. The downside to doing that was the event was in January, opening day is April 1, and it's now February 1, and we have nothing. We have a demo, and we've stood up and we've said to the world, hey, this is what baseball is going to look like on this great coming out great device. And we had nothing. So we pretty much had to really accelerate, bring in a whole bunch of new development teams. Our development team really had a Herculean task of getting this new app ready because we were already trying to get our regular iPhone app out in time for the launch of opening day. But that engineering team just put in a huge amount of work, and on April 1st, when the season started and the iPad launched, at-bat was there in the App Store ready to go.
And for that season, we had two apps on the App Store, two at-bat apps. We had at-bat for iPhone and at-bat for iPad. And at the end of the year, Apple came out with their daily rewind of the top apps for the season, and at-bat was named the top grossing app that year, beating out such notable apps that year as Angry Birds.
One of the other big 2010 occurrences for us is we were trying to figure out, now that sort of smartphones were becoming ubiquitous, what could we really do to offer fans who had this device on them all the time? And we thought, what about a set of features for fans who are at the ballpark? So we decided to create a set of utilities in at-bat for fans going to games, like maps and menus. You could check into games to record what games you've gone to. And we started going to the clubs because we wanted to launch this for the All-Star game and asked, all right, what can you give us in the way of maps? And we started to get some pretty rough blueprints, other sort of print materials, which left Adam and I to go walk around the stadiums and actually record every concession stand, every shop, every little area in the park. We were going around with a clipboard and marking off, here it is. But it all paid off because we were able to get this great feature in our app of all these maps where you could go in and tap and find any bar inside the stadium.
Later that season, we sat around and said, how do we improve the experience? How do we improve the utility of the application? And we decided that it would be really cool if you could sit inside a ballpark and order food and beverage on your iPhone and have it delivered to you. And we did just that, working with the Philadelphia Phillies and Aramark in Philadelphia. We developed and delivered a mobile food ordering app that allowed fans to browse a menu, order, and pay on a credit card, and literally have it delivered to you no matter where you sat in the ballpark. It was really revolutionary, but it really proved to us the utility of the iPhone.
So by 2012, we had sort of found ourselves in the world that Apple had described as the post-PC world. We had started releasing our products on Macs, on PCs, on iPhones, on iPads. We're also on a whole range of connected devices, from Apple TVs to gaming consoles. And we realized that our product line sort of hadn't kept up with the changes. So we started to make particularly to at-bat, some very significant changes. For one, we had always had a separate iPhone and iPad apps, plus a free iPhone app called At-Bat Lite. So the very first thing we did was we merged those together into a single app that users could buy once. Plus, we made the app free and moved the purchase to an in-app purchase experience, meaning you could download the app free from the App Store and subscribe to it. And by making the app free, that enabled us to do a third thing, which was let our MLB TV subscribers, who are paying us over $100 a year to access the complete best package of live streaming games, could now come into the app, log in, and at no additional cost access all of our content. Which meant with that one MLB TV account, you could get all your content on an iPad, on an iPhone, on an iPod Touch, on an Apple TV, on a gaming console, on the PC, or a Mac. So we really started to rethink our product line to embrace this post-PC era.
Right. And the net result growth was explosive. We actually saw 2 times the growth in 10 and 11 combined in the number of downloads. It was really monumental.
The other big change we made is we realized that while offering great utility, putting all of those ballpark features in at-bat had created a lot of what we called feature bloat. If you've ever developed apps, you start to get feature creep. You add more and more content, and over time the app gets harder to test. The build cycles slow down, not to mention the fact that the content just became harder to find. So we split out all of the ballpark content into a separate app called At the Ballpark, and now we had a separate utility for fans going to games.
Right. And what we saw at WWDC last year was the release of iOS 6. And iOS 6 enabled us to deliver experiences like passbook ticketing. And in fact, we took the opportunity after the release of the software to launch in 4 ballparks. And fans took to it. In fact, 12% of all single game tickets were downloaded using passbook.
So it's now 2013, and at-bat is on all of these iOS devices. We're also, of course, on Android. We've done a Windows Phone version of it, a BlackBerry version of it, a BlackBerry 10 version of it. We even did a Palm version of it. But a question we get asked a lot is, it seems like your newest features always come out on iOS first, and then everything else seems to follow. So we thought we would share a little bit about the experience from the development side about why this tends to happen and why iOS tends to go first. And it really comes back to that fragmentation story we were talking about earlier. So when we develop for iOS, we're pretty much supporting about 10 devices between the iPhone, the iPod Touches, the iPad, iPad Mini, Retina, etc. When we develop for Android, so far we've had at-bat users on 2,000 different devices. However, the story is a little more complicated because there are also different operating system versions. So on iOS, it's about 153 total combinations of devices running different operating systems. But on iOS, most of them tend to be on iOS 6 or the latest version because everyone's getting the latest update. So a lot of the secondary devices really aren't our primary focus. But when you multiply those on Android, we see 15,000 different device OS combinations. And of course, we can't test them all, but there are many, many users who are still on Android's 2.3 operating system or haven't gotten the latest update, and particularly features around video playback are really difficult to QA and test to make sure they're working on every device. And a huge percentage of our time on these other platforms just goes into supporting video, which frees up our iOS team to be moving on to new cool features that Apple's been releasing.
So let's look at the results. At-bat downloads on iOS devices, you're looking at 70% compared to 30% for all the other devices combined. Usage, 80% of our usage is on iOS devices. And revenue, 85% of our revenue is coming from iOS devices.
The other big number that we tend to track is usage. I mean, at the end of the day, we really just care, are users having a good experience with our app? Are they enjoying it? Are they getting the stats they want, the video they want? And one of the ways we measure that is by looking at return visits. So what we've seen with our at-bat subscribers is that 60% of them are coming back almost every day during a month. And that's really important to us because we really do want people to use the app every day. We want it to be part of their lives as a baseball fan.